I'm Walter, 68 years old, and I built my life believing a man's word and a man's blood were the only two things in this world you could trust completely. 4 months after my wife died, I carried her old hearing aid box into a repair counter to have the charging case fixed, and the technician nearly dropped it when he saw the serial number etched inside the lid. He locked the front door, pulled the blinds, and told me to sit down because what he'd found on the device was going to break me in half. Before I go any further, tell me in the comments what state you're calling home tonight. And if you've ever had someone you loved use your own kindness as a weapon against you, hit that like button so I know I'm not the only one who's lived it. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare actually started. For 38 years, I ran a family hardware and lumber supply out of a mid-sized town in Ohio, the kind of business where your name is on the sign and your handshake is worth more than a contract. I built that company from a single rented garage into 4 locations across the county, and every board and nail in it was meant for one purpose: to hand it to my son someday, so he'd never have to start from nothing the way I did. I married my wife, Carol, when I was 24. We raised one son together, Nathan, and I gave that boy everything a father could give. I paid for his business degree at Ohio State. I paid off his first house. I stepped back 3 years ago and let him run daily operations at the company while I eased into what I thought would be a peaceful retirement with the woman I loved. 4 months ago, that peace ended. Carol died on a Thursday afternoon while I was at a Rotary Club luncheon downtown. Nathan and his wife, Brianna, had stopped by the house to drop off groceries. By the time I got home, the ambulance was already pulling away, and the paramedics told me it looked like a stroke, sudden and massive, nothing anybody could have stopped. I believed them. Grief doesn't leave much room for suspicion. But in the months before she died, Carol had been struggling. Her hands would shake. She'd forget where she put her keys, forget the names of neighbors she'd known for 20 years. Her doctor said it might be early cognitive decline, stress, age, who could say for certain. To help her stay independent and safe on her walks, I'd bought her a pair of hearing aids with a built-in location tracker and a small voice memo recorder. So if she ever got confused or lost, she could talk into them and I'd be able to find her, or at least understand what happened. The paramedics handed me her personal effects in a plastic hospital bag that night: her wedding ring, her reading glasses, and those hearing aids. The left one cracked down the shell from where she'd hit the kitchen tile. I couldn't open that bag for months. Grief has a way of making you flinch from anything that still smells like the person you lost. Yesterday, I finally found the strength to go through it. I wanted the hearing aids repaired so I could keep them in her jewelry box. Something small of hers still working, still hers. I drove to a little electronics repair shop 2 towns over, owned by a young man named Marcus Webb. Marcus was practically family. I'd helped him buy his first set of diagnostic tools when he was starting out, back when nobody else would give a 23-year-old black kid from the East Side a business loan. Carol used to bring him banana bread every Christmas. I handed him the case and told him I just needed the shell resealed and the internal memory cleared so I could store them safely. The moment Marcus scanned the serial number into his system, his face changed completely. The color drained right out of him. He looked past my shoulder toward the front window, like he was checking to see if anyone had followed me in. Without a word, he walked past me, flipped the sign to closed, and pulled the security gate down over the glass door. The bolt clicked into place, loud in that small, quiet shop. "Marcus, what's going on?" I asked. He didn't answer. He grabbed my arm and pulled me into the back room where he kept his server racks, shut the door, and stood there in the blue glow of his monitors with his hands actually trembling. "Mr. Hollis," he whispered, "you need to look at your wife's life insurance paperwork tonight, before you're the next name on a death certificate." I stared at him, my mind refusing to process the words. He sat down at his terminal and explained. A few weeks after Carol died, he'd run a routine backup sync on the cloud server that stored recordings from her hearing aids, and he'd found a massive corruption spike, time-stamped almost exactly to the hour of her death. Somebody had tried to remotely wipe the device and the cloud backup at the same time, but they didn't know Marcus kept a hidden local cache on every unit he serviced, an old habit from a data recovery job that had once saved a client's business. He'd spent weeks quietly rebuilding fragments of a corrupted audio file from that cache, afraid to call me, not knowing who else might be involved. The screen flickered on. It wasn't video, the hearing aids didn't have a camera, but it was audio. First person, captured from inside Carol's own ears the day she died. I heard her breathing, ragged, uneven. I heard the particular scrape of our kitchen chair against the tile. And then I heard her voice, thin and frightened. "Nathan? Something's wrong. I can't feel my arm." A long pause. Footsteps. And then Brianna's voice, flat and cold, in a way I had never once heard from her in 9 years of marriage to my son. "Just breathe, Carol. It'll pass." Not, "Should I call 911? Not, "Sit down, let me help you." Just, "It'll pass." Then Nathan's voice, quieter, talking not to his mother but to his wife. "Is she going down? How long does the doctor say it usually takes?" I felt my own heart stutter in my chest. My son had asked his wife how long it would take his mother to die. The recording cut to static right there. The shell must have cracked when Carol fell, damaging the drive. "That's as far as I've gotten," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The encryption on what's left is heavy. I need more time, and I need to know I'm not putting myself in danger doing this." My mind was a wreck of fury and disbelief. Carol hadn't just had a stroke. She'd been left to die on purpose, by 2 people who called her Mom at every Sunday dinner for the last 9 years. And Marcus had said, "Look at the insurance paperwork before I become the next name." My phone rang right then, and the caller ID lit up with one word: Nathan. My thumb hovered over the screen. I forced my breathing steady, forced the rage down into a locked box somewhere behind my ribs, and answered. "Hey, Dad," he said. That easy, practiced warmth in his voice. The same tone he used closing deals with lumber suppliers. "Brianna and I are coming by in 20 minutes. We really need you to sign some paperwork transferring the business accounts into a trust with your memory lately. It's just safer if we handle things for you." He hung up before I could respond. The pieces slammed together with terrifying clarity. My son had let his mother die, and now he was coming for me. I stepped out of that repair shop into the cold autumn air with 15 minutes to prepare. 38 years running a hardware business had taught me how to read a man across a negotiating table when he's bluffing, when he's desperate, when he thinks he's already won. I had to use every bit of that now on my own child. I let my shoulders sag. I slowed my speech and let a little slur creep into it. I had to become exactly what they already believed. I was a grieving old man whose mind was starting to slip. Right on schedule, Nathan's black pickup pulled up outside my house, Brianna in the passenger seat with a smile so bright it made my stomach turn. "Oh, Walter." "We were worried sick," she cooed, hopping out to take my arm like I might shatter. "You shouldn't be out walking around by yourself. Not with everything going on with your memory." I mumbled something about picking up Carol's hearing aids, letting my words drag just enough to sell it, and let her guide me into the truck like I was made of old glass. Nathan drove with one eye on the road and one eye on the rearview mirror, watching me. "Dad, we need to talk seriously about the business," he started, that manufactured concern thick in his voice. The accountant flagged some issues with how the accounts are structured. "Without Mom here to co-sign things, it's a mess. And frankly, Bree and I are worried about you handling the finances alone." I stared out the window, kept my face blank. "I can still write a check, Nathan," I said. "We've got plenty in the accounts. Nothing to worry about." "That's exactly the problem, Dad," he said smoothly. "You've got 4 locations. Real estate, retirement accounts. It's a lot for anyone to manage, let alone somebody dealing with what you're dealing with." Brianna reached back and patted my knee. "We just love you, and we want to protect you, Walter. There are people out there who prey on men in your position." The hypocrisy of that sentence nearly cracked my composure right there in the truck. They were the predators. But I nodded slowly, playing my part. "It's simple, Dad," Nathan said. "We're heading to the attorney's office right now. You just sign a power of attorney, and I'll handle everything. The accounts, the trust, all of it. You won't have to think about a single thing again." It was a beautifully constructed lie. The instant my signature hit that page, my son would have unrestricted legal access to liquidate everything I'd spent 38 years building. Brianna reached into a thermos bag at her feet and produced a travel mug. "I brought you your ginger tea, Walter, the one that helps settle your stomach and clears your head. Drink it up. It's still warm." I took the cup with hands that trembled for real this time, not from the act. Underneath the ginger and honey, there was something else. something faintly metallic and wrong. "Drink up, Dad," Nathan urged without looking away from the road. "Bry made it special for you." I brought the cup to my lips, pretended to sip, kept my mouth sealed. When Nathan cursed at a truck cutting him off and glanced away for half a second, I let my wrist jerk and spilled a heavy splash of that tea straight onto the rubber floor mat by my shoe. Almost instantly, a faint chemical hiss rose off the mat, and the rubber began to discolor, turning a sickly pale yellow exactly where the liquid pooled. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Carol's memory problems. My own fatigue and confusion these last 4 months. The ones everybody blamed on grief and age. It wasn't grief. It was them. We arrived not at Gregory Alderman's downtown office, where he'd handled my family's legal matters for 26 years, but at a strip mall storefront, wedged between a nail salon and a payday loan place. A man in an ill-fitting suit named Dale Corwin greeted us with a smile that didn't reach his eyes and slid a thick stack of papers across a scarred table. "Standard power of attorney, Mr. Hollis. Just need your signature at the bottom." I picked up the pen, let the tip touch the paper, and then let loose a violent, racking cough that doubled me over. "I'm sorry," I wheezed, rubbing my chest. "I can't read this today. Left my reading glasses at home, and my chest feels tight. I need to take this home and go over it when my head's clear." Nathan's jaw tightened, the mask slipping for one fraction of a second, his eyes flashing with pure rage before Brianna's hand landed gently on his arm and smoothed it over. "Of course, Walter. Take your time," she said sweetly. "No rush at all." That night, Brianna insisted on staying in my guest room, just to keep an eye on things. Later, alone in my study, she brought me a mug of that same tea and a small white pill, claiming the doctor had prescribed something for my heart. I tucked the pill under my tongue, swallowed water to fake it down, and thanked her. The second her footsteps faded down the hall, I spit the dissolved pill into a napkin and poured the tea into the soil of the large ficus tree by the window, wiping the mug clean before I sat back down. By morning, that ficus was dead. Blackened stems, yellowed soil, leaves curled into brittle husks in a matter of hours. I stood there staring at it, understanding fully now what 4 months of grief symptoms had actually been. I kept the act going through breakfast, offering Brianna a weak thank you for how well I'd slept. When Nathan's phone buzzed and his face went pale, he practically sprinted out to the back porch to take the call, leaving his leather bag on the kitchen counter, unguarded. Brianna went down to the basement for creamer. Alone, I popped the simple combination lock with a bent paperclip, a trick I'd learned decades ago, dealing with jammed cash registers, and found, in the bottom compartment, a modified copy of a trust document with a section highlighted in yellow. Section 6. Survivorship Contingency. If I died within 6 months of Carol, the entire business and estate would bypass the charitable foundation we'd planned and transfer 100% to Nathan. Carol had passed 4 months and 1 week ago. I had roughly 3 weeks left on their clock. I got the documents back into the bag just as Nathan came storming back inside, and I played the confused old man reaching for the sugar bowl so convincingly that his suspicion melted right off his face. That afternoon, I drove to an independent testing lab across the county line, paid quadruple their rush fee, and got results back within hours. The pill residue was a synthetic sedative designed to mimic dementia symptoms. The soil sample was saturated with thallium, tasteless, odorless, nearly undetectable in a standard autopsy, and known in toxicology circles as the poisoner's poison because it perfectly mimics natural decline before triggering fatal heart failure. The chemist urged me to call the police immediately. I told him no. An arrest was too clean, too merciful, for what these two had done. If we called the police, Nathan would lawyer up, drag it out for years, and sleep soundly on bail while spending money he stole from his own father. I drove straight to Gregory Alderman's office, told him everything, and watched a man I'd known for a quarter century turn cold with fury on my behalf. He didn't hesitate. "We're not going to the police, Walter. We're going to build something they can't lawyer their way out of." His forensic accounting contact spent the night digging, and by 2 in the morning we understood the full shape of the trap I was in. Nathan wasn't just impatient for an inheritance. He was drowning. 3 years of reckless expansion, a failed second location he'd hidden from me, and worse, nearly $2 million, borrowed from a group of investors who didn't send friendly reminder letters. Men who had made it clear, through channels Gregory's contact intercepted, that Nathan's time was running out fast, and that if he didn't pay, it wouldn't just be his problem anymore. We built the trap that night. Gregory carved out $400,000 into a newly restricted account, monitored and flagged, wrapped in a narrow, limited power of attorney that let Nathan manage that account and nothing else. It looked, to a desperate and drowning man, like a lucky break from a fading old father finally caving to pressure. The next afternoon, I called Nathan over, wrapped in a blanket in my recliner, playing exhausted and defeated. I told him I couldn't handle the stress of signing everything away at once, but that I trusted him to manage a smaller account first, to ease me into it. His eyes lit up at the number. $400,000 wasn't the full inheritance, but it was more than enough to buy himself time with the men hunting him. He signed without a second's hesitation, sat down at my desk with his laptop, and within minutes wired the entire amount to an offshore account tied to his lender. The moment his laptop closed, my phone buzzed with a message from Gregory. The wire had been intercepted the second it crossed the border. Federal wire fraud, clean and undeniable, with digital fingerprints leading straight back to Nathan's own login credentials. I should have felt triumph. Instead, my phone buzzed again, this time from Marcus. "Get to the shop now." I finished the rest of the audio. "It's worse than you think." I drove through the rain with my knuckles white on the wheel. Marcus met me at the door, pale and shaking, and sat me down in front of his monitor. He'd recovered the final 90 seconds of that recording. I heard Carol's voice again, weaker now, gasping, asking for her heart medication on the kitchen counter. I heard the distinct rattle of a pill bottle, then the sound of running water, someone pouring her pills down the sink. And then Nathan's voice, so close to the microphone it made my skin crawl. "Sorry, Mom. I need the business. Dad won't ever suspect it was us. He trusts us too much." Then silence, and a sound I will hear for the rest of my life, my wife's final breath. Marcus reached for his phone to call the police right then, and I gently stopped his hand. "Not yet," I told him. "A quiet arrest is too easy for what they did to her. I want it public. I want it in front of every person he's ever tried to impress." Nathan's 40th birthday party was 2 nights away, a lavish event he'd booked at the country club, paid for, I later learned, on a business credit card he wasn't supposed to have access to. I told Marcus what I needed: the full audio file, loaded and ready to broadcast through the venue's sound system the second I gave the signal. He agreed without hesitation, and I called Gregory to set the second half of the trap. FBI agents, already circling because of the wire fraud, would be stationed quietly nearby, waiting for my word. The night of the party, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror and put on the same charcoal suit I'd worn to Carol's funeral. For 4 months I had practiced weakness, hunched shoulders, a shuffling walk, a fog behind my eyes. Tonight that performance ended. I stood up straight, squared my shoulders, and drove myself to the club. The banquet room was full of Nathan's business associates, longtime family friends, and 2 men in dark suits sitting quietly near the back, whom nobody seemed to know the investors Nathan owed. Brianna spotted me first, and her smile froze solid. Nathan's laughter died in his throat when he saw me walking toward him without a shuffle, without a slur, standing taller than he'd seen me stand in months. "Dad, are you sure you should be out?" he stammered. "I feel remarkably well tonight, son," I said, and watched real fear flicker behind his eyes for the first time. He pulled me aside, lowering his voice to boast, unable to help himself, about how well his investment had already started performing, proud of committing a federal crime, utterly unaware the FBI already had his digital fingerprints. I said nothing. I simply told him he'd made his choices, turned, and walked away, leaving him confused and rattled in the middle of his own party. When the lights dimmed for his birthday toast, and he raised his glass to talk about honoring his mother's memory, the audacity of it nearly broke my composure. I reached into my jacket and pressed the small transmitter Marcus had given me. The speakers crackled to life, and Carol's voice filled that country club ballroom. 200 people froze as they heard her breathing go ragged, heard Brianna's cold voice telling her it'll pass, heard Nathan ask how long it would take. The room fell into a horrified, dead silence as the recording played through to its end, to the sound of running water and pills going down a drain, to my son's own whispered confession echoing off the chandeliers. "Sorry, Mom, I need the business. Dad won't ever suspect it was us." Someone screamed. Glasses shattered. Nathan stood frozen on that small stage, the color completely gone from his face. And when his eyes found mine across the room, he saw none of the fragile old man he thought he'd been poisoning. He saw exactly who had built the trap that just closed around him. "It's fake," he shouted, panic cracking his voice. "This is manipulated audio. My father's been manipulated." But the room had already heard the truth in his own voice, and nobody moved to help him. The two men from the back of the room stood up slowly, their eyes locked on him with an entirely different kind of promise, and Nathan bolted for the kitchen exit straight into a wall of FBI agents who had been waiting in the service corridor the entire time. They read him his rights on the spot: conspiracy, wire fraud, and, once the state prosecutor reviewed everything, negligent homicide with special circumstances, given the recorded evidence that he'd stood by and let his mother die. Brianna tried to run, was caught by two agents near the coat check, and immediately turned on her husband, screaming that it was all his idea, that he'd threatened to leave her with nothing if she didn't help. Nobody in that room offered either of them a shred of sympathy. As agents dragged Nathan past me, he fell to his knees, begging, telling me the men he owed money to would kill him in prison, telling me I had to save him because I was his father. I looked down at him and felt nothing but a hollow, exhausted quiet where my love for him used to live. "I don't know who you are," I told him, and turned my back, and walked out of that club into the cool night air, the first deep breath I had taken in 4 months. The trial was swift. The recording, the toxicology report, and the financial trail Gregory's team had built left no room for a defense. Nathan and Brianna were both convicted and sentenced to consecutive terms, with no possibility of early release for at least 25 years. Everything they had tried to steal was instead redirected, through Carol's name, into a new wing of the county hospital's cardiac care unit, the Carol Hollis Women's Heart Center, because heart failure had been used as their weapon, and I intended for her name to save lives with the very thing that had taken hers. 6 months later, I stood outside that hospital wing on a bright spring morning, running my fingers over the bronze plaque with her name on it, and for the first time since she died, I felt something close to peace. I still keep her hearing aids on my nightstand, repaired now, silent. The truth they carried finally given its due. Some nights I sit in my study with a cup of tea I make myself, and I don't check the color, and I don't wonder what's underneath the surface, because I know exactly what's in my own kitchen now. I've learned something in these last 6 months that I never wanted to learn. The love you pour into a child doesn't guarantee it comes back to you. Blind trust, even in your own blood, is not the same thing as faith. If something in your gut tells you that something's wrong, don't let anyone, not even someone who shares your last name, talk you out of trusting it. Have you ever had to fight for the truth against someone you loved? Tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if this story meant something to you, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me. There are more stories like this one still to tell.